Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that has now featured on the channel a good number of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the last year since I first discovered them, and the one we're having a look at today is by all accounts a little bit of a beast, and it's a style that we've not had from this brewery before. They are mainly known for their New England hazy IPAs, but this one is at the other end of the spectrum, so curious to see how it turns out, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this beer as well. So yeah, for this one then we are going to head to Karlstad on the northern banks of Värmland, one of the Swedish Great Lakes, a bit to the northeast of Gothenburg of course, on the Swedish west coast, and we're going to have a look at another beer from 10 Hands Brewing, and this is review number 6 or 7 that I'm doing from these guys if memory serves me correctly. But this particular beer is called Black Celebration. It comes in at 12.5% ABV, and it is an Imperial Stout with coconut, cocoa nibs and vanilla added into the brew. As I say, brewed for their 2nd anniversary. So yeah, I think this one, it should be a little bit of a beast. Now this beer was released here in Sweden as part of the local småskalig assortment through Systembolaget for March of 2021. And I think this was the only beer that they released this month, if memory serves me correctly. Last month I had a Berliner Weisse from them, and that was the first beer I had from them that wasn't a New England IPA. So yeah, to try something at the other end of the spectrum I think should be very interesting from these guys, but I have heard very good things about this one. So fingers crossed it lives up to those, and hopefully it makes for an interesting review as well. So yeah, let's see how we get on with this one then. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from 10 Hands Brewing so far, and you will no doubt see more added to that list in the near future because I do keep an eye out for the different beers that these guys are doing. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about 10 Hands Brewing then, on to my brewery notes. So 10 Hands Brewing, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Karlstad on the northern banks of Vänern in Värmland County, which again is to the kind of northeast-ish of Gothenburg, Göteborg on the Swedish west coast. And this company was founded by a group of friends. So the 5 friends behind the company are Robert Hedel, Johan Eklund, Fredrik Steen, Göran Larsson and Jan Karlsson, and each of these guys own 20% of the company, and it was officially founded in November of 2018. And the fact that there's 5 of them involved, that is the idea behind the name 10 Hands Brewing. But all of them have some home brewing experience, although it's Johan Eklund who is the main brewer. They released their first beer in March of 2019, which was an IPA called Firstborn. As I've said in other reviews, I would love to see them release that through Systembolaget at some point. Maybe that's something they've got planned for 2021. And in that first year of operation, they produced around 20,000 litres. But they started releasing their beers through Systembolaget in 2020. I think it was around April or so that I reviewed the first one. I did review the first couple of beers that these guys released. And so far, as of March 2021, they've produced around 30 different beers according to Untappd, and they're starting to expand into different styles now. I think, I actually think, I couldn't say to be 100% sure, but I think until the Berliner Weisse that they released through Systembolaget last month, they hadn't produced a beer of another style and released it commercially. So yeah, it's definitely cool that we're seeing a few more different styles from these guys. I hope that they do like a black IPA and a proper West Coast IPA, a lager and stuff. You know, a Helles Lager or a Doppelbock or something could be interesting from these guys too. But for this one, of course, we're going to the completely opposite end of the scale compared to what they normally do. But I think that's always a good thing to do. to give you a good measure of what a brewery is all about. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about 10 Hands Brewing for the moment. As I said, very well known for their New England IPAs these days, and they are just kind of in their infancy, so it'll be interesting to see how they expand over the coming years. But yeah, if you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that they've done. So yeah, let's get on and actually have a taste of this beer itself then. So I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork of this one before we open it up. I'm having to tilt it because if I do this, it gets the little camera, it gets the camera's kind of viewfinder reflecting off it, which is a little bit annoying. I need to figure out how to fix that actually. But yeah, the artwork on this one is very, very nice. The girl who does their artwork, I think, is her name Violetta, I think is maybe her name. But yeah, they actually released a beer named after her quite recently, of course. But yeah, beautiful artwork on these beers. I think it's very, very nice. You can see the coconut at the top, and there you can see Black Celebration. But 10 Hands is on the back of this one. There you can see. I always compare this to Yevo from the Beast with a Million Backs Futurama movie that was there. It really reminds me of that. It looks a little bit like a nerve cell as well. It looks a little bit like a nerve cell or something like that. Synapse and all of that. But yeah, the 10 Hands symbol is very, very nice. This one is a 330ml can, and I think I paid maybe about 60 or 70 Swedish kronor for this one. I can't remember. I've got a feeling it was 60 kroners actually. So let's go with that. So 60 kroners is about €6. It's about £5, about £5.30 or £5.50, something like that, sterling, and then in American dollars it would maybe be about $7, something like that. So that gives you an idea of the price for this one. But 12.5%, it is a little bit of a monster, and you can feel the weight of this one in the can actually. So yeah, I think this will be a little bit of a monster. But like I said earlier, this is their 2nd anniversary beer. It says that down there on the bottom actually. Maybe you can see that, but it uses coconut from the Philippines, roasted Alta Verapaz cocoa nibs from Guatemala, and I think it's Madagascan vanilla that they put in this if I remember rightly. But the name Black Celebration apparently is a tribute to Depeche Mode, who they apparently love. But yeah, let's get this guy out then and we'll get on with the tasting. I'm very curious to see what this beer has in store for us. Oh, you can smell that already as soon as you open it up. But yeah, really excited to do this actually. I love trying new styles of beer from breweries who are known for particular things, and as I say, these guys are mainly known for New England IPAs. So to try an Imperial Stout from them is very, very nice. It was like when I tried those Imperial Stouts from Treehouse. Those were really good. But yeah, this stout contains barley malt, wheat malt and oats, so I think it will be leaning towards the pastry stout side of things. And you know, with these adjuncts in it, coconut, cocoa nibs, vanilla, I think it's probably going to be a sweeter stout. But yeah, just make sure my OCD is happy, and there we are. So yeah, as you can see with this one, and as you would expect with an Imperial Stout, it's poured a lovely dark ebony rosewood colour. You can see, if you sugar this beer around in the glass, you can see how oily it is and how it's just kind of sticking up there. But it's got a little bit of a nice kind of ring around the edge of it, a little bit of a kind of medium beige sort of thing. But you can see when we poured it, it did have a little bit of head, but that faded very quickly. That's quite common actually with high alcohol stouts. Quite often they don't maintain their head all that often. Wheat usually helps head retention, from what I understand. I don't really know the science behind that actually. That's something I do need to read up on. But yeah, this one has pretty much no head, just a little bit of a kind of medium beige ring around the edge of the glass. But yeah, one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there. Well, what's left of the head, there's just a few little bits of wisp on the top of it. But in terms of an Imperial Stout, it kind of looks exactly as you'd expect. If we shine the light through it, it's very opaque. There's not a lot of light coming through this one at all, but when it's got wheat and oats in it, you would expect it to be kind of more hazy and thick in its character. But yeah, it certainly lives up to what you'd expect. So remember, the colour of these beers, it's dependent on a couple of things. One, the type of malts that you use. And then 2, the length of your wort boil. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar's caramelised, thus you get a darker beer out of it. But then it is dependent in the first instance on the type of malts that you use, and then adjuncts and barrel aging will also play a role. Now, adjuncts obviously are playing a role in this one, particularly the cocoa nibs, I'm sure, are going to be highly involved in the colour of this beer. But yeah, it's certainly not particularly surprising in terms of what you would expect from this style. A big, thick looking Imperial Stout, this one, really dark ebony rosewood colour. But yeah, that's all we really need to say about the appearance of this one. Let's take a closer look at the aroma and see how we get on. Ooh, that's, yeah, it's kind of interesting, that, for sure. It's got a good toasty character to it as well. I think the cocoa nibs were supposed to be roasted and the coconut was supposed to be toasted, from what I gather. But you can really smell that nice toasty thing, that sort of toasty vibe with this beer. So underneath you can smell the nice kind of oaty creaminess there. You can smell that sort of, there's a little bit of a toasty, sort of, you do get a little bit of the toasty, well-fired backbone to it. I am getting a little bit of that out of this beer, but the oats and the wheat are smoothing everything out in this. You get a lot of that. You get a lot of that in this beer, absolutely. So yeah, nice little toasty, well-fired, bread crusty backbone. A bit of that kind of smooth, wheaty character in there. As I say, the oats are really helping smoothing out the beer as well. But yeah, sitting on top of that, you definitely get the coconut. I think the coconut is sort of giving you a nice sort of base layer to the beer, but you can smell that dry cocoa coming out of this one. It's a really well-fired, charred chocolate that you're getting out of this beer. Like, you know, sort of, it comes across as like an 80-90% cocoa, but at the same time it's got that sort of powdery edge to it. If you think about, you know, the Nesquik powder that you use to make chocolate milk, or in Sweden, oh boy, it's kind of like that, but just a more kind of darker chocolate, rather than, it's a more kind of dark chocolate rather than a how would you say, it's more of a darker chocolate sort of thing than how would you say, it's more of a dark chocolate than a milk chocolate you get out of this one. But the overall vibe of this beer does become really quite sweet the more that you smell of it. I do have to say that about it. You start to get a good little bit of sweetness out of it. There is almost just a little hint of a licoricey note coming out of this as well, which is quite interesting. I'm just getting a little touch of that kind of licoricey aniseed thing coming out of this beer too, definitely. But yeah, when you sugar the beer up, you do just get a little touch of a licoricey note out of it, which is quite interesting. But yeah, nice sort of dry cocoa notes in there. Like I said, it's got a really kind of toasty, charred sort of chocolatey element to it. The more that you smell of it, the more you get a bit of a kind of bread crusty quality as well. I mentioned that earlier. So it smells like a really layered beer, basically. So toasty, well-fired bread crust underneath. Then you've got the oats kind of smoothing that out. You've got a little bit of wheaty, bready character in there as well. You get the kind of toasty coconut. Then I think the coconut comes out a little bit further forward on the nose than the sort of charred chocolate element does, but the vanilla sort of rounds everything together, I think, which is quite nice. But yeah, it smells like a very nice beer. It's kind of what you would expect from what it says it has inside it. So yeah, it's quite it comes across as quite a straight shooting stout in a way. But like I say, when you sugar the beer up, you get a little bit of an almost licoricey, aniseedy thing out of it. So I do wonder if there's a little bit of, it almost reminds me a little bit, the smell that you get with this one comes across a little bit in a similar manner to what you get from a Belgian double almost. So I wonder, it's almost like because they add like candy sugar and things into their beers. So almost you get a little bit of that almost kind of type of aroma out of this beer. A wee bit of a kind of phenolic, licoricey type thing, which is quite interesting. But yeah, the malty side of this beer I think goes together really nicely. There's a good little bit of brown sugar comes out of it as well. I do get a wee bit of a toasty brown sugary element to this one as well. But yeah, I think the malty and adjuncty side of this beer comes together really nicely. Let's focus on the hops and the fruits then, just before we taste the beer. So on the hoppy side of things, you definitely get a nice little bit of that coming out of this one. Good wee bit of earthiness in the back of the nose. You can smell there is a good little floral component as well, and then there's just a wee bit of a kind of grassy zestiness on the front kind of edge of the nose there. So I mean, the green component doesn't play too big a role in this beer, but you can definitely pick up that floral aromaticity and a bit of grassy zestiness there, and a wee bit of earthiness at the back of the nose. So yeah, green component is there, but it's not playing a madly prominent role in my opinion. But on the fruity side of things, there is a good little bit going on here. So like I said to you before, this one does have a little bit of that kind of, it's got a wee bit of that, what would we say, it has just got a little bit of that kind of sort of phenolic-y, licoricey sort of thing going on, which I can really appreciate. It's got a good little bit of that, but at the back, you know, on top of that, you do get a nice kind of juicy plummy note to this one. There is definitely a bit of a raisiny sharpness in there as well. So yeah, raisiny sharpness, a kind of plummy note underneath. You do get the impression of a bit of a kind of more dried fruit, like a pruny kind of element, a dainty or pruny element sitting underneath as well. There is just a wee bit of a cakey vibe to this beer. And then, you know, there's a wee bit of a kind of blackberry type note on the front of the nose too. So yeah, I really like how this beer goes about its business. I think this one's going to be really quite interesting. At 12.5% though, I'm sure it's going to be an absolute monster. So yeah, just take a little bit of time and enjoy the aroma of this one. I think it's got quite a nice interesting depth to it in some ways, and it's quite unique in a way, with the way all of these different notes push their way out of the beer. So yeah, let's have a taste of this one then and see how we get on. This one is the Black Celebration, the second anniversary beer of 10 Hands Brewing in Karlstad in Värmland here in Sweden. 12.5% Imperial Stout with coconut, cocoa nibs, vanilla. That's it. Should be very nice. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers, and happy second anniversary to 10 Hands Brewing. That's really nice. I'm going to say straight away, it is very well executed. That sort of phenolic-y thing that I was getting in the aroma from the beer, that doesn't really come out in the flavour just on first impressions, but this beer's got a good little bit. It comes across in the aroma as if it's going to be quite a kind of pastry stout, but it's actually got a little bit more kind of bitterness and things like that. It's actually a very well balanced beer, this. I think this one is really nicely done. So thumbs up to 10 Hands. If they can produce stouts like this, I think they've got a bright future ahead of them. I think that's for sure. You know, it'd be interesting if they can do the big heavy beers like this. Maybe a barley wine from 10 Hands could be an interesting proposition as well. Food for thought. Food for thought. But yeah, this is a really nicely executed Imperial Stout. Absolutely. Yeah, it does get sweeter and sweeter the more that you drink of it, but it's still got that nice roasty, toasty and boozy backbone to it. So that's what I mean when I say it's a very well balanced Imperial Stout, this one. It gets a thumbs up from me, absolutely, and I hope that they produce a few more things like this. So yeah. Where do we start with this beer then? Let's kind of try and break down the flavour. So straight away across the middle of your palate, you've got that nice roasty, toasty backbone to the beer. It's got a little bit of a kind of bread crusty sort of vibe to it. I mean, on top of that roasty, toasty, black malty backbone, you get a nice kind of smooth, you definitely get a bit of a nice kind of smooth, bready kind of element to the beer. And I think that's going to be the wheat that's contributing with that there. But yeah, you get that roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust. You get a bit of a brown bready, wholemealy bread kind of sitting on top of it. And yeah, I really like how that goes together, definitely. So yeah, it really sweetens up in the middle of the palate. Actually, that is very nice. But yeah, You get that wholemealy sort of bready kind of thing. I really love that about this beer. And then it really sweetens up in the middle of the palate. So, you know, in the base of this beer, you've got just it's just like a light sprinkling of a toasty, well-fired black malt. There's a little bit of that in there. Then you've got a sort of brown bready thing that just sits on top, but it feels that in the middle of your tongue, it's got like a little dip in it. Then in that little dip in the middle of your tongue, you've got all these kind of sweet, you know, that's where all the kind of sweet things just kind of congregate, if you like. It's almost like, you know, a valley, and everything just rolls down the side of the hills. It's there. So yeah, in the middle of the palate, then there's a really nice the sort of chocolatey side of this beer just kind of comes together, if you like. So you've got this almost oily chocolatey sort of thing there, and it comes in, it's maybe about a 70% cocoa chocolate, I would say. So that it gives you a lovely kind of sweetness there right in the middle of the palate. But as you move a little bit further out from that sort of chocolatey thing in the middle of your tongue, it does develop a little bit more of that sort of powdery, oh boy type note that I was talking about earlier. It definitely gets a little bit drier and a bit more kind of charred. So that's quite interesting. What you're also going to notice is that on the front half of that front third of your tongue and towards the sort of edge, like I say, it's like a bowl in the middle of your palate there, and underneath the kind of front edge of the bowl, that's when you start to get the vanilla elements to the beer, and the coconut, I think, sits on the front half of that middle third of your tongue as well, and it comes out as a sort of subtlety in the aftertaste, and I think it's like I think it's just a little bit like sort of toasty, if that makes sense. It just comes across as a slightly toasted aftertaste, but I really like how that side of things comes together in this one. The coconut, the way the coconut's done in this beer, I think works just really nicely. Some beers kind of try to use coconut and just they kind of overload the beer with it, but this one's just nice and subtle, I have to say. I think you can just say it is just a nice subtle coconutty vibe to this beer. So yeah, the coconut and the vanilla definitely coming out on the front half of that middle third of your palate. You've got a nice sort of chocolatey layer in it as well, but yeah, it's lovely. It really just builds in sweetness the more that you drink of this beer. But it's really nicely done. On the back half of that middle third of your palate, you do start to get the more kind of, you do start to get a little bit more of that kind of cherry chocolate kind of quality coming out of the beer. So yeah, the front half of the middle third of your palate is quite sweet, whereas the back half is definitely more kind of cherry. You start to get those darker, 80-90% cocoa chocolate elements, and then it's just got the toasty thing going on in there as well. There is a wee bit of brown sugar comes out of this beer the further into the aftertaste, sitting on top of that kind of chocolatey bowl thing in the middle of your palate, as I was saying. So for me, it's got a sweet caramel element to it, but then the further you go into the aftertaste, it does develop a little bit more of a kind of toasted brown sugar element to it as well. But yeah, I like that about this beer for sure. The middle of the palate in this one, the malty adjuncty backbone that this beer has, is just really well executed. But yeah, knowing how well 10 Hands can do a New England IPA, I'm not surprised that they've pulled off a stout like this. So I'm just curious to see what they can do with other styles as well, actually. But yeah, let's do the other parts of the beer then. On that border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you can feel there is a sort of almost very slightly cakey vibe just comes out of that. Then you've got a really toasty, grainy element to it. But as you move into that back third of your palate, that sort of cakey note just sort of thins out a little bit and forms the backbone. And then on top of that cakey bit, you've just got like a kind of more airy, you've just got a little bit of a more sort of airy, kind of yeasty type quality to this beer, which I can really appreciate as well. So yeah, the way everything kind of goes together on that one, I think works really well. So yeah, the the brown sugary, how do you say, the brown sugary elements do actually spread back into that graininess as well. But like I say, that cakey vibe there, a little bit of brown sugar, and then the yeasty notes kind of just sitting on top of that. I think it goes together really well. So yeah, you can feel that the sort of thickness of the beer almost in the back of the palate is actually like this, but it's quite airy. But then as you move further forward, it kind of gradually moves its way down. As you reach that border region, it really condenses, and then you've got a nice kind of dense layer going into that middle third of your palate where all those kind of malty and sweet adjuncted parts of the beer are coming out. But I think that covers the middle part of your palate quite extensively with this beer. If you go to, the only other thing to say would be if you go to the front corners of your palate, then diagonally back, you will notice a little bit of a woody vibe comes out of the beer as well. But yeah, the malty adjuncty side of this beer is really well executed. On the hoppy side of things then, pardon me, back corners of the palate, it's got a good little bit of earthiness to it. As you move further forward, the earthiness does come forward a little bit and you get a wee touch of herbal quality, but then as you move progressively forward on the sides of your tongue, it's got a little, pardon me, it's got a little bit of a more kind of floral aromatic note, and that just progressively comes out. Round the front curve of the palate, it's got a good little bit of a lighter sort of grassy element to it as well. It's got a little bit of citrusy, zesty kind of thing going on there. But yeah, I like how that how all of that goes together. So yeah, the green component of this beer is quite nice. Of course, if you age this one a little bit, then that is going to drop away, and the whole, you know, the green component might smoothen out a little bit. But I think it works. I do think it really works quite well. Yeah. So yeah, green component of this one is quite nice. I'm not sure how well beer ages in cans because of the seal and things like that around the edge right now. If that's something I do need to read a little bit more upon as well. But yeah, this beer I think could age very nicely, definitely. But yeah, I do find that the further you go into the aftertaste with this one, the beer, it does actually get a wee touch of zestiness with that grassy component on the front third of your tongue. Absolutely. But yeah, let's focus on the fruity side of the beer then to round off the tasting section. So as I always say, on that front third of your palate, that's where you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. If you go to that border region between middle third and front third of your palate, there's a good little bit of a cakey, almost brownie-like sort of thing builds its way up there, so you can feel that form in the border region. There's a little bit of a grainy and well fired sort of vibe to it, but then you've got a nice kind of smooth cakey base on that front third of your tongue as well. So I think that works really well. But yeah, the sort of cakey base that you get out of this beer, I think that's a really nice sort of subtlety to this one. I think it suits the coconut and it suits the vanilla really well. But on top of that sort of cakey base that you have in the front third of your palate, that's of course where you get the fruits. So when you first take the beer in, it does have a wee touch of a raisiny sort of sharpness to it. So yeah, you do get a little bit of that raisiny sharpness there, but underneath it, you've got a juicy plum, and this is at the back of that front third of your palate. So a little bit of raisiny sharpness, a bit of a kind of juicy plum, and you've got that sort of boozy, cakey sort of thing. It's almost a little bit like Christmas pudding. You do get a little bit of that out of this one, and then you start to get some of the datey, pruny elements. But as you move further forward on that front third of your tongue, it's got a little bit of a sort of sultana. You do get a little bit of a sultana kind of figgy type vibe, and as you reach the kind of front edge of the tongue, there's a sort of blackcurranty base and then a blackberry sharpness sitting on top of that. But the front third of your palate, I find, really dries out the further you go into the aftertaste, and you start to get, you know, you really start to get the more kind of just cakey, boozy cake sort of vibes out of the beer. So yeah, this is definitely interesting in that sense. It's a really quirky beer, this one, in terms of how it evolves, but as I said earlier, a big thumbs up from me. So yeah, I think that describes the flavour of this one quite well, actually. I think we can leave it there for the tasting section. But yeah, on the mouthfeel, brain is not working in this one. This is why I shouldn't film beer reviews when my brain's tired. That's how they end up longer as well. But yeah, in terms of the mouthfeel of this one then, I'd say this beer is probably at the bottom end, the full bodied. Carbonation is very smooth. It's got a real slickness to it, this beer as well. The more that I drink of it, the more I think it's a really slick thing actually. But in terms of the hoppy bitterness and stuff like that, I would say the beer overall is quite, what would I say? I mean, I don't think this beer is overly bitter. I think it's maybe got about a 60 IBU kind of thing to it. You're getting a bit of bitterness from the cocoa nibs, you're getting a bit from the hops, and you're also getting a little bit from the sort of black malty base of the beer. So there is a good wee bit of bitterness from this one, both from the malty side and the hoppy side of things. So I can appreciate that about the beer. It's got a lovely, pardon me, malty sweetness to it. The malt base is very layered. It's got smoothness, it's got a bit of toastiness, roasty toastiness in there, which you'd expect from an Imperial Stout. And it's got a lovely sweetness to it as well that develops later on. And you've got some nice oily, juicy fruity characters out of this one too. It's got a bit of a dried fruity character in there also, I would say. But yeah, I think this is a really nice beer. I can see why people were telling me this is one that I should be keeping an eye out for, and I'm glad that I got the recommendation to try it. So yeah, the mouthfeel of this one, I think suits, is exactly what you would want from an Imperial Stout, and everything just fits together really nicely in this one. So I hope that we see more Imperial Stouts from 10 Hands Brewing. And like I said, a barley wine, a doppelbock, you know, some of these more malty type beers would also be very interesting. And I hope they do a classic West Coast IPA, high bitterness West Coast IPA would be really nice too. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this review. So this one was the Black Celebration, a 12.5% Imperial Stout with coconut, cocoa nibs and vanilla, from 10 Hands Brewing Company in Karlstad in Värmland here in Sweden. Really, really nicely executed beer, this one. Happy second anniversary to 10 Hands once again, and I certainly look forward to the other beers we're going to review from these guys in the future. But yeah, thank you again for watching my reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, pardon me, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from 10 Hands Brewing are as well, and I'm sure we'll return to these guys at some point soon. I do hope they release Firstborn at some point during this year as well. But yeah, thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, check out 10 Hands Brewing, and I'll catch you guys in the next review. Slàinte, skål, cheers.